You think the ego can be conquered through force, by restraining pride, silencing anger, disciplining desire. Yet each attempt seems to strengthen what it seeks to end. Every rejection of the ego becomes another act of ego. Shams Tabreez questioned this entire logic. He taught that the ego feeds on resistance. It dies only when seen, not when fought. Its survival depends on being treated as real. The true fire that burns the ego is not denial or discipline, but awareness. Clear, direct, unclaiming. When seen in its falsity, it is nowhere left to stand. You begin to wonder, if the ego collapses under understanding, not struggle, then what kind of fire consumes illusion without destroying what is real? Shams Tabreez appeared in the 13th century as a wanderer who defied every spiritual pattern of his age. He did not teach by method or scripture, but by dismantling certainty itself. When he met Rumi, the scholar's learning dissolved into direct perception. Rumi later called this encounter a burning, not of body, but of identity. Shams did not seek to correct behavior. He sought to expose illusion. He said that what hides truth is not sin, but selfhood. His teaching was simple yet unbearable to the ego. Nothing false can survive direct awareness. What you call self-control, he called avoidance of truth. You name it, ego. But it is not a substance, only a movement of claiming. It arises wherever thought says, "This is me," or "This is mine." It borrows light from awareness, then declares itself the source. Shams explained that this identification is the root of all confusion. The ego is not an evil force. It is error, the mistaken idea that experience belongs to a separate owner. When you believe this, you divide what is whole. To burn the ego, one must first see that it was never a thing, only a habit of possession. But if it is not an object, what exactly is being destroyed when you say the ego dies? For Shams, the fire that burns the ego is not emotional turmoil, but pure perception. Fire was his word for truth, the heat of awareness that leaves nothing hidden. When you look directly at a thought without defending or rejecting it, you expose its illusion. The I that claims ownership cannot survive being observed, because it depends on ignorance of its own construction. This burning is not punishment, but purification, the false consumed by understanding. You discover that what disappears was never real, and what remains cannot be harmed. The self that fears the fire is itself the illusion. So what truly burns? The thought, or the thinker who believed it was real? You try to refine yourself, to become wiser, purer, humbler. Yet every act of improvement assumes someone to improve. Shams warned that even humility can become vanity when claimed by I. The ego survives through spiritual disguise, feeding on progress as much as pride. The moment you believe you are advancing, the illusion finds new ground. True burning begins when even the desire to be free is recognized as part of the same structure. Freedom is not the ego's achievement, it is the ego's absence. You begin to see that every effort to perfect the self strengthens the one who claims to be the doer. If the seeker is the problem, who can reach the goal? When you observe the mind without interference, its movement reveals itself. The thought I am loses its authority and becomes one perception among others. Shams called this the beginning of seeing, awareness looking at itself. No one watches. There is only watching. In that instant, the division between observer and observed collapses. The ego cannot exist without that division. It depends on contrast, on something to compare, defend, or possess. When perception stands alone, unclaimed, illusion fades by its own irrelevance. This is the quiet fire of understanding. You realize that burning is not an act, but an insight. If illusion vanishes by seeing, was there ever anything to destroy? The ego's root is ownership. My thought, my success, my failure. But no experience truly belongs to anyone. Thought arises and fades without your control. Action occurs before it is claimed. Shams taught that liberation begins when ownership ends. Awareness remains, but the possessor is gone. The self was never the doer, only the commentator. When this is seen, effort relaxes into clarity. What you called my path is simply unfolding. To burn the ego is not to lose what is yours, but to realize nothing was ever yours to lose. When ownership ends, presence remains untouched. If no one owns experience, who could ever fall or rise within it? To thought, the end of ego appears as death, an emptiness, a void. But Shams revealed the opposite. When illusion ends, reality begins. The absence of I is not nothingness, but total presence. The separate self was a narrow lens. Its dissolution opens perception beyond division. You do not vanish, only the claim of separation does. This is the paradox. The more you disappear as a person, the more reality appears as wholeness. What dies is confusion. What remains is being itself. You once sought to survive this fire, yet now you see that only the unreal burns. If what you are is awareness itself, can it ever be destroyed? Shams said love is the highest form of burning. Love consumes separation without violence. It leaves no I to seek or to be sought. You'd call love devotion, but for him it was pure reality. The recognition that nothing stands apart. The ego cannot survive love because love has no opposite. It demands no protection, no ownership, no return. To love truly is to disappear into what is. The lover and the beloved are not two. They were never divided. What you call surrender, Shams called completion. Love burns not by destruction, but by truth. When only unity remains, who is left to say, I love? The ego is not burned like a substance. It dissolves like an error recognized. You began believing it was an enemy to be defeated. Now you see it was only a misunderstanding sustained by belief. Awareness remains unchanged, the silent witness that never fought, never claimed. Shams Tabreez's secret was simple. The fire you feared was your own seeing. The self does not end in flames. Illusion ends in clarity. Burning is revelation, the recognition that nothing separate ever existed. You do not destroy yourself. You outgrow the idea of being someone. If what you are is beyond ownership, beyond definition, beyond I, then what remains but truth itself, untouched by the thought of you? You no longer ask how to burn the ego. The question itself belonged to the ego's dream of control. Now there is only awareness, simple, unpossessive, and without center. What once felt like loss appears as restoration. Life continues, but without the constant interpreter. Choices arise, words move, silence deepens, yet none are claimed. This is not an end, but a beginning without beginning. The fire has done its work by revealing that there was never a wall to cross. You remain, not as someone awakened, but as awakening itself. What more could burn when everything false has? Already turned to understanding? The journey begins with the assumption that ego is an obstacle to be conquered. Through Shams Tabreez's insight, The premise reverses. What you fight survives. What you see dissolves. Each layer of ownership, pride, and effort falls away until burning becomes awareness itself, a steady perception that no longer identifies with form. Self-improvement turns to self-exposure. Striving turns to seeing. The illusion of a doer disappears, and love reveals itself as the final dissolution of separation. The path ends where it began, but now the question has vanished with the one who asked it. Burning becomes knowing, and knowing becomes stillness, the quiet recognition that the fire was never outside you, but the truth within awareness all along.